Jeff Durbin. All right, hey guys, we have a very exciting guest on with us right now. She puts together some of my very favorite videos on the issue of abortion. They are brilliant, truly brilliant. Have you guys seen these videos before? Yes? She is with Choice 42. Her name is Laura Klassen. Laura, welcome to Next Week with Jeff Durbin.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hey, it's a pleasure to have you on, very, very much. So people might not recognize you right now because you're not wearing your hair.
I know, I'm sorry, the hair's not actually pink.
That's right, that's right. Well, that is good to know, actually. So, wanted to have you on next week because you truly do put together some of the most brilliant videos, satirical videos, culturally engaging videos in the area of abortion. And so let's tell everyone first, where are you from, Laura?
Canada. I live in Ontario, just outside of Toronto.
Ontario, Canada, which means that our audience worldwide now has more respect for you in putting these videos out. Yeah. Truly. So let's start with that, Laura. Let me ask you, why, even in the context that you're in right now, living in Canada with as difficult as it is to have this kind of speech and rhetoric in a country that's gone the direction that both yours and mine has gone, but I think Canada in some different ways. Why this work for you? Like, how'd you get into it? Why would you want to put yourself out there like that?
Well, for these videos specifically, we wanted to engage our culture on the topic of abortion, and it is so difficult here because, you know, we have a leader who said that the abortion debate is over, and you can't even be in the Liberal Parliament if you aren't pro-choice. So it's just really tricky to even have these conversations. So we were just looking for a way to get the message out there. The reason that Choice for Two started was because I noticed that there was a gap between women facing unplanned pregnancies and the actual centers that would help them. And so that's why we put together the database that we have on our site, which is the largest in Canada. Yeah, so that's kind of a little overview.
So I said it wrong. I said Choice 42. Choice 42. Yeah,
we did that on purpose to be ambiguous because if we came out and said, you know, like pro-life, something, a lot of doors would have been closed to us. And because our name has choice in it, a lot of doors are open to us.
That's powerful.
So it's been working.
Well, it's interesting. One thing maybe our audience, you guys may not be familiar with, is that not only does Laura have to actually contend with the political climate that she's in terms of trying to be very, very careful and wise with how she does this, but for all of us that are engaged in this battle worldwide, when we look at platforms like Facebook, when we look at platforms like YouTube and Twitter, they have even worked with their algorithm to essentially halt speech from our side on this issue. I know that when we put videos up, I'm not sure, Laura, if you've experienced this yet, when we put videos up, now as we do the descriptions for the videos and the tags for the videos, we have to be very careful about what we actually put in there. We can't be very descriptive ourselves of the videos because they'll get ultimately halted or shut down.
Yeah, for sure. And now with our Just Saying videos, we don't actually say abortion in them. Yeah, and that's on purpose for that reason.
Yeah, we've actually, I'm not sure, Laura, if you've experienced it or not, we've had people actually get upset with us saying, you're not telling us what's in the video, you're not being very descriptive of the video, and there's a reason for that. The platforms have actually gotten together in many ways on this, and in their algorithm, the language itself is being watched and monitored. So if you put in, like directly Christian language or conservative language or pro-life language, your video will not be seen by the large majority of people because of how you describe it.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's right. But here's what I want everyone to do. If they haven't, I think a lot of people have seen your videos already, but I want to make sure everyone gets to see them. This is a video you did called The Magical Birth Canal. I love all your videos, but this is one of my favorites. So if you haven't seen it yet, this is from Choice for Two, Laura Klassen's video on The Magical Birth Canal.
Human rights. You may think you've always had yours, but you would be wrong. So how did you get your human rights? From the magical birth canal, of course. Disclaimer. Birth canal is not the size of an actual birth canal. Just saying. Before the baby or fetus is born, it is not a human being. Clearly. But as it passes through the birth canal, something amazing happens that transforms it into a person with human rights. Observe. Not a person, Not a person, not a person. Coming out the other end, a person! Human rights! Congratulations, you now have value. Can't say the same for this one. So what exactly happens in the birth canal that causes this magical transformation? No one knows. But popular scientific theories include fairies, aliens, or of course, a mini Big Bang. I think it's fairies. No human rights? Human rights. No human rights? Human rights. Makes sense. Thanks, magical birth canal. Science, logic, magic, human rights.
What if it's a C-section?
So that was the magical birth canal video. Laura, talk to us about that, the magical birth canal. You have gone after if you don't have a uterus, you don't have a say. You talk about the A word and you have the magical birth canal. Talk us through this particular video and how you're trying to engage the culture. Why is it important to address this particular issue, especially in light of what's taken place in New York recently?
Yeah, so what is now possible, what happened in New York, I mean, that's what we already have here in Canada, abortion on demand throughout all 9 months.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to show how silly it is to think that a person becomes a person the moment that they're born. It just doesn't make any sense. And like here in Canada, our law, that's actually our law, when you become a human being, is when you fully exited your mother's body. Now you are a human being. And it's ridiculous. Yeah. So that's why we made this, just to show, here's the baby here, not a human. Here's the baby here, human. It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And it's interesting because many times I think Christians in our culture, we have bought into the modern fiction an idea that what it means to be a Christian is to be nice. And the gospel is the gospel of niceness. And if you're not being nice and if you're engaging in mockery of any kind, you're really not being righteous and you're not being a sweetheart like Jesus was. And so, Laura, you're failing in some way, right? But it's interesting because if you look throughout the scriptures, you see that God's prophets and God's representatives engaged very, very often in a righteous form of mockery. And I think what you did in that video, which I appreciate so much, is it's really rooted in scripture in terms of a way of reasoning with something that's foolish. And that is to say, in the book of Proverbs, it says, don't answer the fool according to their folly, or you'll be like them. And then it says, answer the fool according to their folly, lest they be wise in their own conceit. And I think your video about the magical birth canal is exactly in line with what God calls us to do in terms of responding to something that's foolish and answer them according to their folly, which the magical birth canal does wonderfully. My favorite part is where you said fairies.
Yeah.
That was the best part. So you have another video, and it's called No Uterus, No Say. Talk to us about that one, because that actually is, I found that's probably on the street, Laura, that's probably one of the ones that we would hear the most as we're outside of the abortion mills preaching the gospel and trying to offer help to mothers and fathers and trying to save children's lives. With that kind of mercy ministry, we often will hear the argument, you don't have a uterus, you don't have a say, you're not a woman, you can't talk about this. Talk us through that one.
Yeah, that one really irritates me because they are trying to make it a women's rights issue when it's a human rights issue.
Yeah.
And so, of course, men should have a say. And, I keep saying here, but like here in Canada, it's really bad. If you're a guy and you try to say anything on this topic, you're just completely plowed over. So that's why we made this. I wanted to kind of encourage, the men out there that, yeah, this is your issue. You should be standing up for babies in the womb and women as well. And so it's just dumb that you can't have an opinion on the slaughter of human beings if you don't have a uterus.
That's right. You know what I love about you, Laura, and what you're doing is you're showing how stupid the arguments are for abortion. Mm-hmm. And that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Show the foolishness, show the stupidity. And I think why I appreciate so much what you're doing is because I think we have to, as Christians and people who care about human rights in the womb, I think we have to get to the point where we realize that the opposition isn't pulling punches. The opposition wants the whole way. For example, the pro-life movement has, over the last 40 years in my country, and really internationally, truly internationally, has fought this on an incremental basis, and we've tried to just be really kind and soften the language around this, which I think has been devastating to us. And we've thought, well, let's do this incrementally and work our way peacefully back down. But I don't think we've realized, and I hope that we are starting to realize, and I think your videos are helping with that the opposition who wants to be able to kill children, abort children, they want the whole way. And now that's obvious in Canada, which it's all the way through birth. And now we see it, of course, popping up across more states now, like New York, and more are talking about it, that the opposition doesn't want the incrementalism. They want the whole way.
That's right.
They want the full thing.
Yeah.
So talk about why you're dedicating your life to this, because I think it's important for people to recognize, when you do videos like this, it's not just for sports. When you engage this issue, it's not just for fun. It's not like you're necessarily making a bunch of friends because of it. And your life can be in danger at times. You can be threatened. We've received that often. So why, Laura, why are you doing it? Why are you actually putting yourself in a position where you can be mocked and persecuted? Why are you doing this?
Because human beings are being killed. My relatives, my Oma, I come from a German background, and so I've heard a lot about World War II and the Holocaust, and just a lot. And I always thought, like, how was it possible that this happened? Like, how could people just go along with the slaughter of this group of people? Yeah. And then I looked around in my own country, in my own time, and I said, well, here it is happening exactly again. So I would have liked to think that if I'd been born in that time, that I would have done something to speak out for the Jews and people who were being persecuted during that time. And this is the issue of my time here in my country as well as around the world. And I guess I just can't not do anything about it, and I feel like more people should be doing something about it.
That's powerful. Laura, yesterday I was in a court here in Arizona, and I experienced something yesterday that was just really powerful, and just what you said just reminded me of exactly what I was thinking yesterday. There's a time not far behind us where we can think back to where people said, I know that looks like a human. It's not a human, it's a Jew. And we can think back now in horror, and we can ask questions like, how could anybody even imagine such a thing? And how could we ever have gotten to a place where this was accepted? And what was it like back then to walk around and this was going on around you, and it was accepted in many ways? And I was in court yesterday, and I was watching a man who stands outside of an abortion mill with love and grace, reaching out to mothers and fathers. He saved so many lives outside the abortion mill. I watched him get sentenced yesterday for a crime, and the crime was basically calling out to women at an abortion mill and amplifying his voice. And I thought to myself, we have the attorney, the prosecuting attorney, talking about punishing him in a way that will send a message to everybody, the judge ruling in an unjust way, the police department working here. And I sat in a courtroom, Laura, and I'm watching this take place, and tears are falling from my face because I was thinking to myself, we're in the same position now. It's happening all around us now. The court system is accepting it. The police are on their side.
Yeah.
I'm watching it take place. And the reason why I bring that up to you is that I think it's important for us who agree with you and who believe in what you're doing to make sure that we're partnering with you and people like you and people like us to make sure the world is seeing these videos, the refutations, all this engagement. Laura, I'd like everybody who's watching our show to go and right now to go actually get you one of your videos and to share it across their social media, because I think it's so important if we're going to actually change the minds of the culture like they've been changed in terms of should we kill Jews or not. I'd like that to happen now in the area of the unborn, and it's only going to happen if we have people as courageous as you are in Canada doing the same thing and actually engage in the culture. Mm-hmm. So I want to thank you, Laura, for all that you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you. You as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's Laura Klassen, guys. Go get it. Choice 42. Get it at YouTube. Look up her on Facebook. Like her stuff. Share her content. And we'll get you in just a moment right here on Next Week with Jeff Durbin. Thank you for watching, guys. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Next Week with Jeff Durbin. I'm Jeff Durbin, and these are our new cards. How do you like our new cards?
I know, they're
sweet.
fancy.
These are sweet. Thank you, Isaac, for these wonderful ideas. Look at him. He's already earning his pay.
Who?
Awesome. Isaac.
I don't know who that is.
I'm Jeff. This is Luke the Bear.
What up?
And that is Joy Hunter the girl.
Hello.
That's right. So, hey, we're here today talking on Next Week about a lot of things, very important things today, a lot of stuff in the news right now. But let's start off with a little news report, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
what's
So
up?
did you guys hear about this this Indian guy? He's 20, like Indian, like Asian Indian, like the country India.
Wait, start over, because I think you had a hard time with that.
No, I wasn't. I was actually.
Okay.
So the Indian guy, he's 27-year-old. His name was Raphael.
Did you just ask me if I heard about the
Samuel.
Indian guy?
The Indian guy?
Just the Indian
the
guy?
Indian guy.
Okay.
That happens to be 27 years old.
Okay.
And his name happens to be Raphael Samuel. Anyways, he's suing his parents because he was conceived without his consent.
Oh yeah,
I'm not making
I
this up.
thought that was one of those Babylon Bee articles when I saw that come
no,
up.
this is for real.
I did see it come across. That's
This is-
actually happening?
This is for real.
Where,
So-
here?
No, in India.
In India.
That's why I said the Indian
Oh,
guy.
okay, so
Yep.
it's happening in India.
Yeah, yeah. So here I got a quote from him. He said, "I want everyone in India and the world to realize one thing, that they are born without their consent. I want them to understand that they do not owe their parents anything. If we are born without our consent, we should be maintained for our life. We should be paid by our parents to live." So he's suing his parents, and it gets crazier.
For
because
how much?
I didn't see
Like,
how
what
much.
did he establish that
Right.
means?
Yeah, it didn't say.
Wait, yeah, how do you figure out the monetary value of
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So his parents, who are both lawyers,
Okay. So he's a real genius, this guy.
so they said, his mom was like, you know what, I have no hard feelings against him, but can you move out of the basement first? But no, his mom literally said something along the lines of, well, I'll give him credit, considering the fact that he's putting this case together and he knows that we're both lawyers.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's possible that he may have learned to be this litigious because he's grew up in a house with two
Right.
Yeah.
lawyers. At the
Lawyers,
dinner
yeah.
table, they're talking about how they can, lawyer up people. And he was like, hey, wait a minute, I might have a case myself here.
yeah, so he's part of some group that's anti-natalism. I never heard of it before.
Natalism?
Is that what it is? Anti-natalism?
Natalism.
Natalism. I don't,
Yeah.
they're nihilistic.
Wait, the group is nihilist. They're nihilists?
Yeah.
That's even better. They're nihilists. Nothing matters.
Yeah, exactly.
Except this.
Except getting paid by your parents to live.
Yes.
That
He's
matters.
a nihilist,
I was
dude?
setting you up, by the way, and you totally...
Oh, I didn't even, yeah. Oh, that must be really hard for him. Nihilist. This is a real story.
This is the
Are
real
you
story.
sure? Because we're going to find out later this is totally
No,
a
it's
joke.
totally
It's
real.
kind of like the show that you guys haven't seen yet. It's the new. Have you guys seen a new documentary on Netflix? It's the Abducted in Plain Sight or Kidnapped in Plain Sight? Christian audience, of course not. No, okay. Actually, it's actually a really good documentary. Cautious, you cannot watch it in front of children. It is a piece of history. It's all stuff that's based on evidences and eyewitnesses. Definitely not something you want to watch in front of your children, but it is something that really happened. It's in the news and everything else. Happened in the early 70s. It's the same kind of story. It's like, this doesn't seem like it's actually real. I was watching it with my wife, and I told you guys that halfway through, I stopped it. Last night, I'm watching it. I stopped it. I looked over at Candy. I said, this is fake. It's not real. This is going to, at the very end of it, they're going to reveal, gotcha. Just kidding. See? Like, it's just pretend. And it's real. It actually happened.
People are dumb.
I think that's in the Bible.
It's a lesson learned. I think it is.
Somewhere. Find a verse that sounds something like that.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, true
I think
story.
it's in the first book of Bubba, chapter 1.
You keep dropping that
I keep
card.
dropping my car. I'm not used to it.
Didn't Johnny Carson used to do that? He used to throw out, like, the cars, like, shoo.
I know Jimmy Fallon used to throw his pencil at the end of Weekend Update.
We need to think of something creative for next week with Jeff Durbin. Like,
Carmen, don't throw anything at the cameras, though. Carmen will be mad.
Yeah, Carmen will be mad at you. I'll take Luke's hat off and throw it at the audience and whip it at somebody's head. Just a first-time visitor. Who's that? Raise your hand. No, okay. They actually raised their hands. All right. So I'm amazed that's actually a real story. Yeah, people are crazy. Yeah. And it goes to the issue today we're going to talk about in terms of justice.
Yeah. Well, along the lines, I was going to say there's probably some nut job lawyer that will actually award him. They're going to be like, oh, yeah, you're right.
That's right.
Your parents didn't have your consent.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Just don't mention you're a nihilist.
Yeah.
Because that won't go well for us.
Right, yeah.
No. And Joy.
I also have something relating to justice.
Nihilism?
No.
No? Okay.
This person was actually very passionate. They think a lot of things matter that are very arbitrary.
Okay.
I saw this shared on Facebook by actually a few people. And so it is a Facebook post accompanied by a picture of beef, red meat. And the picture is of a $95.57 worth of meat that was, attempted to be shoplifted out of a Safeway. Mm-hmm. That is a local grocery store in Arizona.
That's a lot of meat to shop
or a Vons, depending on where you're from. I know, yeah. That's actually, if you see the picture, or even if you just think about how much $100 worth of meat from the grocery store is, that's...
Even if they're like
it's
New
a
York
lot.
strips,
I don't know.
That's a lot of steaks.
I don't know how they were trying to smuggle it out either. I don't have that information.
We still don't know what kind of meat it was?
No, it was like steak, it was ground beef. Like the picture shows just a variety of red meat.
$100
Yes.
for the ground beef is a lot.
I know. And it was like the tube kind, like in the plastic. So yeah, that's like, I mean, gosh. That's like,
you're just walking
that's
out
like
stiff.
400 pounds of beef.
Yeah.
Okay, but so anyway, so someone tried to shoplift it, and that basically this post is about the person who stopped them from stealing it.
Okay.
So
real American
obviously, most retail stores, their policy, if you see someone shoplifting, is going to be let them take it. The liability is way too high. People die trying to reclaim their Starbucks.
Yeah, their property.
Yeah, and so it's just not worth it for the company to endanger their employees to get $100 worth of meat back. Mm-hmm. So for whatever reason, the Safeway employee decided to stop this person. But when they stopped the person, they had already left the Safeway. So they had gotten out of the doors, just outside of the doors. So what that means is that, and I don't even know if it really matters if it got outside of the door, but once it leaves the store, it cannot be put back on the shelf for sale. Just because...
Would anybody really want hamburger meat that was down?
Right. Again, we don't know how he smuggled it out or she smuggled it out.
Right.
And so the point that this person that posted this Facebook post was trying to make is that there's no difference for the store between the stuff being successfully stolen and them catching the person. Because either way, they have to, just like mark it off and put it in their, wherever that stuff goes that you cannot sell. Yeah. So it's considered a loss. And then at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter or whatever, they just mark that loss down and it goes into their numbers. So Safeway is barely affected by this. The next thing they say is really what says it all. This is a direct quote. As long as we fail to provide for the basic needs of the people in this country, there is no ethical reason to mess with shoplifters.
Wait, who said this?
The person that made this post.
Oh,
The
my
point
goodness.
that they're trying to make is that this self-righteous store employee attempted to stop a poor person from feeding their family
Oh, wow.
with $100 of red meat.
Oh, wow.
Which I think you can assume that if you're stealing red meat, you have a fridge and a stovetop. And so the assumption here that I'm trying to point out is that the assumption is that the person who stole this was poor. And I think that this is just a perfect example of what's going on in our society. It's a great example that people understand because there's no sexuality or race involved. There's no it's not so super emotionally charged.
Right.
But you guys have heard it said on Next Week with Jeff Durbin that socialism is theft.
Yep.
So so is shoplifting,
Yeah.
it turns out.
Yeah. Well, it used to be.
Right.
Yeah.
The point is that this person is trying to say that because that person is poor, they're allowed to steal.
Yeah. So it goes to like the mantra of the day is the ends justify the means.
Right.
Always. And the end of satisfying the hunger of a poor person, taking care of that need, is the most important thing or is the good thing. So to get there, if we have to steal, rob, cheat,
Right.
all those things to get there, that's okay because the main thing is to satisfy the hunger of a poor person.
Well, so what if a person makes $25,000 a year? What if they make $40,000 a year?
Right.
It's also
What if they
subjective.
make $100,000 a year?
Right.
Then is it wrong for them to steal? Because I'm pretty sure there are a lot of really rich people who went to federal prison for stealing a lot
That's
of
right.
money.
Exactly right.
And so it cannot be our morality because theft is a moral issue.
That's right. Objectively.
Yeah, so there has to be some objectivity. If we are going to prosecute someone through the law over something, then we need to have a standard of where it comes from.
An absolute standard.
Yeah,
Right.
and it
That's
can't
right.
just be, well, this person needed $100 worth of meat. They needed it.
Right. Exactly.
So they're allowed to have it. And also the other, it's so full of assumptions. The assumption that this person couldn't afford to buy the meat and that they needed it to eat. And then the assumption that this Safeway employee is self-righteous when the Safeway employee probably makes minimum wage.
Right.
Like they're probably considered poor by this standard too. Are they allowed to steal from
They
Safeway?
couldn't have purchased that much meat.
No.
Needed that meat more than the guy that stole.
Yeah, and it goes because it's all across the board though, because you reject the Bible, you reject God's revelation of Himself. You don't have an objective standard of morality, so everything is possible now.
Right.
Every excuse matters. Like if my credit is so poor that I can't buy the house that I want, so I decide to actually scam somebody or cheat somebody so I can get into the house that I want.
Right.
Well, in the end, I could sit back and say, well, according to our standard today, I needed to satisfy this need, which is to have a nice house to raise my children
Right.
in. It doesn't matter that I swindled this guy or cheated this guy, or it goes to sexuality the same way. Sexuality is the ends justify the means. The ends is I need to be able to experience sexual satisfaction. That is something that I deserve as a human being. I deserve pleasure. I deserve this joy and the satisfaction of sexuality. So it doesn't matter how I get there,
Right.
just so long as I'm satisfied.
Right. Well, and there's always, any way you cut it, there always has to be a redistribution
Okay.
so like in order for the poor person to eat in this case, the rich company, Safeway,
Yes.
has to pay for that.
Right.
They're rich. They're not a part of an oppressed group. They're a part of a group that's doing just fine.
Yes.
Wealthy business owners.
There you go.
And so the redistribution has to happen. The big guy has to give the little guy power. And that's not, you see that nowhere
Yeah.
in God's law. There's
Yeah,
no
right.
redistribution to make everything even.
Yes.
That's just not how it
That's
works.
right. It's a standard of justice that has nothing to do with your group.
Right.
It has to do with God's righteous standard of justice. And it's interesting because it's Dr. Balcom was talking about this in his recent talk at the social justice thing. Do you get a chance to hear that?
I haven't watched it. I haven't
You
saved.
must hear that.
Yeah,
It was really powerful. He brings up a really excellent point that kind of goes towards this idea of grouping in our society. You're part of this group. You're the oppressed group. You're the group that has all of the extra benefits. Doesn't matter if I know anything about you. You're white.
Right.
And so because you're white, you're part of a special privileged group. It doesn't matter if you're the poor kid, the kid who grew up in a poor home, in a place with barely any running water or food your whole life.
You could fit into all the minority groups, but what I'm going to assume,
Yes.
because of the color of your skin,
That's
is
right.
that that's not.
You're a white
don't.
kid from West Virginia or Kentucky, and you climbed your way all the way out of that poverty, all the way, and you worked yourself to death to go through school and to open businesses, and you finally made it after you just worked your tail off, and nobody knows that that's behind you. And then you have another kid over here who might be a black kid who was raised in actually a really wealthy home and had a lot of extra bonuses and privileges and money to get thrown at all these different things, a lot of privilege. But the truth is the white kid is already the person who got too much.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, that stands in this example as well, because I can't even tell you every time I go into a Safeway, they're raising money for a group that is not as privileged. Yeah. When you go in during the holidays, they're collecting food to give to people that don't have food. Yeah. So the standard, the way to make it right doesn't exist, because technically Safeway is taking care of poor people, just not in the way they want.
Right.
Yeah.
By letting them walk out with merchandise for free.
Yeah.
Because we all know that's how businesses thrive.
Yeah.
When everything's free in your store.
And then you get, Venezuela and other country
Right.
problems, right? Where everything's just
Then
now.
you're eating zoo
Now there's
animals.
nothing on. Now there's nothing on the shelves
Right.
anymore. When everything's redistributed and
Right.
everything's given away for free, now there's nothing left.
Right. Well, and Safeway can't provide health insurance for its employees. They can't have employees.
That's right.
And you're just talking about a big empty store where you better walk in and be prepared to fight for your food, I guess.
Yeah. Have you ever been to a low quality store that's not doing so well versus going to like a nice store that? Which one do you want to shop in? Right. Like, you ever been to the store where it's like there's dirty stuff all over the floor and like it's just in shambles, and you're like, it smells really bad, and you're like, I'm not going to come here again. You know, there's a few of those around town I try to avoid.
They exist.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting because this goes to, I think there was a problem. It's funny you bringing this up because we have a very close friend of all of us, and we love dearly, who works in a very famous department store. And I was just recently with him, and he was talking about the fact that he's working security for this store. And he said that essentially he is security in the store. They have security cameras in the store. He works there as security. He stands at the door, but it's all pretend.
Yeah.
He can't do anything.
Yeah.
He can't do anything. There's nothing. He has no power. He says when he sits and watches people steal, either on the video footage or whatever, he can't do anything.
Yeah. Right.
And he says what's interesting too is that people around town that are the people who are decidedly homeless, they want to be homeless. They like being homeless.
Yeah.
They love shooting up the drugs and everything else that they're doing. They like their position in the moment. They know the standard at the department store is that if they don't steal more than $750, it doesn't get reported, nothing happens.
Can't do anything
So
about
what
it.
they do is these people come in every day, and they're like,
With a calculator.
they're like, what's up, bro? And they walk in
What's
and
the
they
tax here?
Yeah, exactly. There's like calculating it. He said they'll walk in and they'll just start stuffing stuff, and they'll know like, well, I'm about at 450 or 500 now. I'm good to go. And all he can do is just go,
Have a nice day.
have a great day, and that's where we're at today, because of all the social justice stuff, because of all the my group is oppressed stuff, because of all that. Stores are afraid of litigation. They're afraid of people who will appeal to some arbitrary standard of when I was stealing your television that was worth $1,500, your guy, he grabbed me by my arm and he left a bruise, and so now I'm going to sue you. Same thing happened while we were in Ireland. Remember in Ireland, we were Jono and Raquella? Remember we were at their house and they were talking about the laws in Ireland? How somebody can break into your home in Ireland, and they could slip on your carpet, and they can sue you. Well, and they'll admit, I was in the process of committing a crime. Yes, but I tripped on your carpet. What's wrong with you? And they hurt themselves, and they will sue you, and they'll get by with it.
Yeah.
There's where we're at in the West today.
Yep.
And then there's guys that sue their parents for being born without consent.
That's right. That's right. And I think that gets us to something good to talk about today in terms of objective standards. Like, Christians have God's own revelation of himself and his own character. So for Christians, it's not like, well, my way's best. How about this for size? Like, how you like these apples? Like, how you like...
How about this?
Yeah.
stealing is wrong.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think of that? Like nihilism? No? Yes? Maybe? But so we're not saying like it's just our preference or, the Christian church has a long history. We've done pretty well for ourselves, we think, in terms of like some good moral decisions. So how about you follow church history? We're saying, no. It's based upon God's own character. God is not a liar. God is not a thief. God is not a murderer. And God is not unjust. And so when you look at his character is the standard of righteousness. It's the objective standard you appeal to. Well, we've lost that today in the West.
Right.
It was at one time. We're not saying that this was a completely Christian nation and it was a utopia, but it was at one time without question. It was a place where you can say, well, those decisions are being made because there's a Christian worldview around us. We all recognize that thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not commit adultery. Like that used to be against the law.
Right.
And people held to it. You can't commit adultery. And if you do, you're guilty. And it's a criminal charge. But now we've lost all that because we say no to God's standard, no to his revelation. And so now it's just moral anarchy, chaos all around us. And it gets us to, I think, a good thing to talk about in terms of New York, what just happened in New York. Now, from our perspective, of course, we would want to say that what happened in New York in terms of them saying you can kill babies up to birth now, and then people arguing, well, like, why not after birth? Like, what's the big deal about afterbirth? Like, it should reveal to us as Christians and pro-lifers that the opposition never wanted the incrementalism. They never wanted can you give us at least 25 weeks?
Right.
They always wanted the whole way because they always wanted consistency. And now you see it in New York. Consistency at its best. The left, liberals, the pro-choicers were always saying, let's be consistent. And they got it.
Yeah.
In New York, they got it. So they say, well, there's no difference. We're saying that you can kill the baby in the womb, so kill it at 40 weeks. What's the big deal? And we've been arguing the whole way in the pro-life movement for so long, well, not that far. That's really bloody.
Right.
And so what we ought to do is say, well, they've been going for consistency the whole time. Why are you afraid to?
Yeah.
Why don't we say consistency it's a human being from conception because it is biologically and biblically.
Right.
And so you can't kill a human being with malice aforethought in an unjustified manner ever. Like when they're when they're conceived, all the way throughout their entire life. But it gets us to a place where we've lost any objective basis for morality because we say no to God, no to his word. So in New York, you've got Governor Cuomo and all these guys and men and women who are cheering and applauding for signing something that says kill babies up to birth.
Yeah.
That's where we're at. And they say go all the way with it. And it shows the failure of the pro-life movement over the last 40 some odd years and how we've been dealing with it, which we get in a lot of trouble at End Abortion Now and Apologia Church because we do a lot of confrontation, not just to the pro-choice movement, but to the pro-life movement, saying, no, that's a wrong way to actually approach this. And you're so afraid to be courageous and to just be consistent. But don't you realize they're not? They wanted consistency the whole time.
Right.
So why don't we actually base this upon Scripture and the gospel itself and call people to repentance and fight for the consistency that they've all been fighting for all along?
Right.
And they got it. So back to the issue of justice. And we'll spend just a little bit of time on this. This week was Stephen Brown's sentencing. Stephen Brown is, which camera am I at here? I don't even know here, but Stephen Brown is a friend of ours. He was criminally cited outside of a Planned Parenthood here locally.
Right.
He, I don't believe, was initially aware of all of his rights in terms of what he could have said and done. But locally, right now, we're dealing with the problem of the Tempe Police Department, the attorneys for the prosecution, and the court system essentially perpetrating an injustice upon a Christian man who has saved so many lives from death, who just goes to the abortion mill to plead with mothers and fathers, to love these men and women and to save these children. Well, they sentenced him. I was at the sentencing yesterday, and it was one of the most really emotionally jarring experiences of my life that I didn't expect. I didn't expect to happen. I kind of went in there with my head up, thinking, we're going to get through this. This is all going to get beat down. This is a local judge who's perpetrating an injustice and lawlessness, and we'll get over it, and it's going to get stuffed down, so no big deal. I went in with my head up, and I got halfway through it, and I realized at a certain point when the defense was talking before sentencing that I realized my hands were shaking, and I realized I wasn't breathing, really. Like my chest was full, and I'm just starting to get teary. And then when Stephen got up on the stand, he just started preaching the gospel.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like arrogant. It wasn't in any way sort of in your face and I don't care. It was this settled, measured, humble, meek, but very bold. This is what I'm doing, and this is why I'm doing it. And he didn't say, I don't care what you do to me, but it was very clear, I don't care what you do to me because I'm going to lay my life down for these kids. And I realized that I'm starting to sob. So I almost got up to leave because I didn't want to get in trouble. And then I looked over and I realized that so is everybody else, starting to sob while we're watching this Christian undergoing this huge injustice. And that's where we're at today. It's injustice upon the righteous, and it's social justice for the unrighteous.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's and we're here because of the lack of the witness of the church.
Absolutely.
So Jesus says the church is the salt and the light. Salt's a preservative. It keeps things from spoil and decay, and light dispels darkness. Jesus says, you're the salt, you're the light. And so if we step away from the culture and we say, doesn't matter, it's not my responsibility, Jesus is coming soon anyway, then you have to now deal with all the injustices and sin all the way around us. And that gets me to a point I wanted to talk about just as a quick thing here. When we talk about what our rights are in America, we look at the Bill of Rights, right? And this is important. We don't ever, this is how we've always been, we want to make a distinction between our position that's based upon Scripture, and we look at history and Christians in history who held to the law of God and fought for it in culture and society around them. And we want to say, no, it was the law of God undergirding the Constitution that gave them those thoughts, right? So we're appealing to the law underneath it.
Right.
So when I have this back here, right? That deserves an applause, guys. Are you carrying around? Yeah, you have yours on right now.
Yeah, I'm not gonna wave it around.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to do that. So when we do that, we're not saying we're holding on to our Second Amendment rights because America.
Yeah.
We want to just make a distinction between just people who are quote unquote patriots and Christians who recognize the justice of God underneath these laws and rules. Well, Stephen was essentially punished for something that is lawless and unjust. The Constitution underneath it has the rights that have been given to us by God, and that is that I have the right to speak.
Yeah.
I have the right to speak. I have the right against a lawless search and seizure. Well, where's that from? Well,
God's law.
God's law. Because what's God's law say? It says this. It says, you can't receive an accusation against anybody unless it's on the basis of 2 to 3 independent witnesses, lines of evidence. So, in other words, a long time ago, Christians were being oppressed. And this is over in Europe. They're being oppressed, and people would just round people up in the streets. They would take them before courts. They would force them to testify against themselves. They would make them say something against themselves. And it was when Christians started appealing to the law of God and they started correcting that in society, that's where we got the right to remain silent. That wasn't given to us by atheism. That's where we got laws against warrantless searches and seizures. Where does that come from? Atheism? Nihilism? No, it comes from the Bible, because the Bible says you need 2 to 3 independent witnesses. No one witness can ever testify against a single person. And what's that mean? If a cop comes to me and says, hey, let me ask you some questions. Let me find out if you're guilty, or give me your ID, and let's figure out, where are you going? What are you doing? You should be able to say to that officer with a lot of Christian love, hey, I don't answer any questions. God bless you. Something to that effect, because if the cop really thought you were guilty of a crime, he has to go before a judge to prove to a judge, I have evidence and testimony that proves beyond a reasonable doubt this man is guilty. Can I get a warrant to go find out some more and search? That all comes from the law of God. The idea of not having to give you any help, no self-incrimination, comes from God's law. Because God's law would work like this. If I'm truly guilty, you don't need me to help you. If I'm guilty, you've got 2 or 3 witnesses now that can all testify against me and prove it. I don't have to say anything, because if I'm guilty, you're going to prove it. I don't have to help you. So the right to remain silent, the right to keep and bear arms, the right to free speech, the right against warrantless searches and seizures, all that is given to you by the Bible. Now, if we keep saying in our society today as Christians, well, we really love our Constitution because it's just so great, it's America and everything else, guess what? You lose it all. Because now it's no longer an objective standard. It's malleable. It doesn't come, those things don't come from God, from His law and His word. That's just something some old people a long time ago, white people, made up. And we don't like them anyways nowadays.
Right. Men.
Right?
Right.
So let's
White
fix
men.
that.
White men that own slaves.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so we have to recognize as Christians that the basis that forms all of these rights and justices is God's law.
Absolutely.
And the only way back to that is a nation has to first love God and love His law. And the only way anybody ever loves God and loves His law is if their heart is changed.
Right.
And the only way their heart is changed is if they repent of their sin and come to Jesus for salvation. And so the role of the church in our society today should be to herald the truth of God's law and justice, to say how good it is, but to recognize it can save none of us,
Exactly.
ultimately. And so what we need is a heart change as a nation, and that's Christ and Christ alone.
It starts with the gospel.
Starts with the gospel. Good show? That's it? All right.
I think so.
Amen. All right, guys. Thank you for watching Next Week with Jeff Durbin. We'll catch you guys next time. Be sure to go to endabortionnow.com to get signed up. Help